Well, I always knew that I was going to start a business one day. Even when I was in college, I was doing finance. This is around like 2007, 8, 9. And so finance was a big, like economics and
Maybe you can talk a little bit more about the side of the story of starting a company and then other companies and what happens there.
I was like, I'm spending a lot of money on this. It's obviously like a big hobby of mine. Can I make this into a business?
How do you organize your time and your actions and your priorities on like 4 streams of things? And let's also tell everyone that you've got a new kid too. So you got lots of things going on.
I think of myself as like, I don't know, the creator of things, of ideas, and then just need people to actually go ahead and execute them. So you need really good people. Like that is like, no doubt, like that's probably the most important thing. And so, for example, like I'm also designing a few different products right now, but I'm not like a product person. What I'm doing now is I'm actually just roughly sketch out the idea, and I'll send it to these people that I work with, and they will come back to me, and you need to have really good people, whether it's on your team or just people like vendors that you're working with. If they understand your idea and they execute on it, then like you're scaling. Like I'm scaling my creativity, creating these physical products without me actually knowing how to do any computer design.
Well, I was just getting prepared and I thought about it was just such a funny story how I got to know you because Matt
Yeah.
Schnock and I were trying to throw a very intimate dinner for 6 to 8 people at his house with CEOs. And the day of, literally, the rest of the people text me one by one, oh, I have COVID, I'm sick. And then you ended
Mm.
up being the only person that came. And Matt was like, oh, his stuff looks really good on Twitter. And we met on Twitter, but I don't really know him. But it turned out to be such a good conversation that we had, and we've been in touch ever since. So it's just crazy to have friends from online. It
It
blows my
is.
mind.
It is crazy that, I mean, that's why, being a creator, this is the power of putting yourself out there, right? Because like
Mm,
I saw Matt's stuff as well, and I was intrigued by it, and I honestly didn't think that he would find my stuff, but like one of
mm,
my posts like went viral, and then I guess he saw that, and then
mhm.
he read through all my other stuff, and yeah, we got connected, and
Yeah,
I'm happy to hear that he like saw my content, and
yeah,
like, yeah, I mean that's like really, it's a big honor. So
yeah. I'm excited too to also have him on this season of the podcast. So we're also going to talk about on on how him and I also met on Twitter. So it's a very, very powerful tool. But um, I want to know, like, what is a version of the story of your story that you love to tell?
mm, how far do you want to go back?
It's all you.
Okay. Well, I always knew that I was going to start a business one
Mm,
day, and so even when I was in college, I was doing finance. This is around like 2007, 8, 9, and so finance was a big, like economics, and people were going to consulting and investment banking, and so like I thought that I was going to start my own hedge fund. Like that was my ultimate goal.
wow.
And so I remember reading, like I was over at a friend's, because my parents are in Korea and my family's in Korea. And so for Thanksgiving, it's always awkward. It's like 4 days off. And so like I always just piggyback off of another friend's, like crash
Oh,
their Thanksgiving like every year. And but I remember I was like, I brought a book with me this particular Thanksgiving. I think it was like 2008, but it was like the book was called like How to Start a Hedge Fund, and it's like most ridiculous thing. But so that was like my thinking was like I'm gonna start something one day, and I want to prepare myself. And so like through that lens, even though I worked in finance for a couple years after school, I wasn't just focusing on the work that I was doing. I was a trader on Wall Street, but I was also focused on like, what does the compliance team do? How does that how do they interact with the trading desk? Like I was looking at all these different pieces and how it would fit together. And I
hmm,
think that really prepared me well for kind of like where I am today. And so like, for your audience, if they're interested in starting a business, I would definitely like wherever you go, even if it's a corporate job, like just pay attention to like very small details, like, what does the receptionist at the desk, like, what, like, how do they interact with, like, who are they talking to, like, all this, like, how's the information being transmitted, like, all this stuff is like, I don't know, I found it fascinating because it was like I was trying to figure out like how the pieces connect, right? So yeah, early on I wanted to start a business one day, and then um I started getting interested in tech probably around 2010. And so I was still working in finance at the time, but I really wanted to come out to San Francisco and just get involved in tech. And so I came here with just a, one piece of luggage, and I was crashing with a friend on the floor for 3 months. He lived out in Berkeley, and so I didn't have a job or an apartment, and it was very rough 3 months.
Mm.
And so I don't know. From that experience, it just kind of humbled me a lot, and it was just kind of like starting over. I had no network. Everything that I knew was in finance. I had no tech background or anything. But I networked my way into a startup, and then from there I got more connected, and then eventually worked at another larger fintech startup, and then after that I started my first company. So it's kind of like this like long journey of different experiences, but I feel like the interweaving theme of all that is that I was curious, and I was like really thought about my future a lot, and kind of like how do I shape my future, or where do I need to be physically also in order to like realize my dreams. And so you know San Francisco was the location that I thought was I thought was the best location for what I wanted to do. And so I came out here just cold, one way ticket. And so yeah, and that's kind of just, I guess, my story in a nutshell.
I love that, and from what I know about you, you almost have this, like, mad scientist passion for entrepreneurship. I know whenever
Yeah.
you talk about it, you're, like, into it. You're into every single detail and how it works and how the costs relate to the revenue. How do I do
Mhm.
this and how do I do that? And, like, my impression of you is that you're always optimizing, and that is so true. Like, I think when you look at your life in hindsight, the signals were always there about who you are and who you're becoming and what you're interested in. And that's such a beautiful story about how, like, you could be in hedge fund, you could be in finance, you could be doing something else, but there's this if you're interested about this certain thing, and in our case it's, we talk a lot about business, of course, and entrepreneurship, then you can learn from any job really, and you can make that your kind of testing ground, and then you're realizing what would be best for me. And I want to talk a little bit about your business
Mhm.
too, because you come with on this lens of what would make the most sense to me, right? Not only
Right.
living in San Francisco, but starting the dog company and other
Yeah.
companies is very much of what would fit my lifestyle. So I think that philosophy is very, very unique and very smart. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about the
Absolutely.
side of the story of starting a company and then other companies and what happens there.
Yeah. So in 2015, but so almost 10 years ago, I started my first company. And the way I came to start this company is kind of funny because, I was working at a blockchain company, right? A crypto company in 2015. And it was not that big as it is now. I think
Mm,
the first big wave was like 2017 when everything just kind of like blew up. But so I was working here, and I left a year and a half later. But while I was there, I was like analyzing like how I was spending my time, and where my money was being spent. And so, time and resource are the two most important resources that everyone has. And if you analyze that, like you mentioned, like I'm kind of a mad scientist for this kind of stuff. Like if you analyze it, like you get to figure out like what you're interested in. And so I realized like, I was spending a lot of money on like honestly like expensive stuff that, I mean, it's like titanium pens and like these little gadgets that you put on your desk, like really well machined stuff. And I was like, huh, like, I'm spending a lot of money on this. It's obviously like a big hobby of mine. Can I make this into a business? And so I didn't know much about it, to be honest. Like I know nothing about machining. I didn't know anything about like different materials of metals or anything like that. But I thought that this could be something. And so, I started an e-commerce business, and I didn't do anything crazy. Like, I didn't start another blockchain company or anything like that, because like I wanted 100% accountability for myself, and I wanted to keep the team really small. And so that was a very deliberate decision on my part, because I knew that if I like hired a bunch of engineers, then I have to raise funding, and then there was whole like, now you're in the VC game where you have to grow 20% month over month, or else you're dead, right? And so I didn't really want that, because I knew that lifestyle was very challenging. And so I started something that's very small, no VC, just bootstrapped. And I started an everyday carry shop called Urban EDC. And so these are things like flashlights, pry bars, pocket knives, even like spinning tops, and just like little like coins and gadgets that are like small that you can carry with you. And so, yeah, I mean, that's still been going strong. And then in 2017, my wife and I brought home a French bulldog, and I mean, we weren't planning on it, but his account just blew up. And I mean, he's a very like, he's got a huge personality, and he's like really good looking. I'm a little biased, but he's really good looking. And so, yeah, he blew up. And then we were like, hey, what can we do from this? And so we took kind of like the same framework of what I was doing with Urban EDC, which was finding different makers and products and kind of like putting them all into one place. And so we did the same thing for the dog brand. And so my Frenchie's handle Instagram handle is Spotted Humphrey. And so we did a play on word there, and so his shop is called Spotted by Humphrey. And so the idea is that he's picking out all the stuff for the shop and everything. And so, yeah, I mean, so essentially we had two e-commerce shops. And then that was, those were like the two main things that we had. And then eventually what we found out was like a lot of our expenses were going into like fulfillment, and fulfillment was a big pain point for us. And so we decided to like go in-house for fulfillment. And then when we went in-house, we had a lot of people asking us like, hey, who's doing your fulfillment? Because fulfillment is a big pain point of mine. And so we decided, hey, let's take on a few private clients and just ship out their stuff. And then those like few clients turned into more and more clients. And then that just grew and grew. And all of a sudden we had like this third business. And the funny thing is, we didn't even have a name for this company. We were just like doing it. And so like a year or two in, we decided, hey, let's just go in on this. And so like GrowthJet was the third business that was born. And this was around 2019. And so every couple of years, like a new business kind of spawns. And I guess in a nutshell, like what I've realized, and I didn't know the terminology back then, but what I've done is actually created this thing called the personal holding company. Um, and this topic of the personal holding company is like really the thing that blew me up on Twitter or X. And like people just really, really were curious about it, and they want to know more about it, because it's like essentially you're taking your hobbies and the things that you do around you. Like, I have the hobby of like flashlights and all that stuff. I made that into a business. With French bulldogs, that's a business. And then the expenses that we had for all the shipping stuff, like we made that into a business. And so like this concept got really big, and people were like, how do you do all this stuff? How do you organize everything? And so yeah, that's kind of how I grew my audience on X, because it's so funny. I've been doing it for so long that I didn't even know that there was a terminology for it, and that people were actually looking to do it. So yeah, that's kind of how all this just naturally grew. Yeah.
Such a great breakdown for the X audience and the Twitter thing. I'm thinking if we expand the definition from like personal holding company to personal holding projects and whatnot, the audience building is like almost like your fourth project, where it just naturally something that you're excited about, you start writing about, there's a lot of following. And this whole motion from the first company to the fourth company, it just feels so efficient. It feels very natural. And I think we've talked about this in one of our conversations, where it's so useful for venture backed companies to learn from bootstrap companies. I know a lot of different types of entrepreneurs, fully bootstrapped. I know bootstrapped companies going into venture funding. I know uh, prior VC funded founders and even VCs themselves now wanting to start bootstrap companies. So especially in the economy today, I think it's a lot about profitability,
Hmm.
about being prudent with your costs, and very, very smart about how you're structuring the business. And it just seems like you are a kind of a genius in the structuring of these things. How do you organize your time
Yeah.
and your actions and your priorities on like four streams of things? And let's also tell everyone that you've got a new kid too. So you got
Right.
lots of things going on.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on. So to be honest with you, so the 3PL business, I recently sold to another 3PL, so that's gone. And so that's been kind of cleaned, and so we, now it's just Urban EDC and Spotted by Humphrey. And then I also had to put the podcast and newsletter on pause for now, especially with the newborn, with his crying and everything. We live in San Francisco, and so space is a very like, it's very precious. And I'm actually inside my wife's closet recording this, and closets make great space for recording actually, because all the clothes get absorbed, the sounds get absorbed. But anyway, um so the way that I think about it is like, um I think of myself as like kind of the creative, I don't know, the creator of things, of ideas, or whatever, right? And then just need people to actually go ahead and execute them. So you need really good people. Like that is like, no doubt, like that's probably the most important thing. And so, for example, like for Urban EDC, I'm also designing a few different products right now, but I'm not like a product person. Like I'm talking about physical product, not like, product manager or anything like that, right? And so what I'm doing now is I'm actually, I essentially like draw out, or I like just roughly sketch out the idea, and I'll send it to these people that I work with, and they will come back to me, and I just like, it's just an iterative process. And so like you need to have really good people, whether it's on your team or just people like vendors that you're working with. Um, but if they understand your idea and they execute on it, then like you're scaling. Like I'm scaling my creativity, creating these physical products without me actually knowing how to do any computer design, like CAD stuff. Like I don't know any of that. But it's really just like I have an idea, and then I immediately like write down how, like, what are the next steps, and then I send that off to like the appropriate person, and then they come back in a couple of days. And so like basically it's like I don't actually do any of the work. It's just me just having ideas, and then I like think about it, and is this important, is it not important, and then I like just, you know kind of like, I don't know, I like throw it up in the air, like to the appropriate people, and they're the ones who execute, and they come back to me. And so yeah, I mean, for the personal hold code stuff, I mean, the important thing is you have to have like, people kind of in charge of different areas. So for example, the dog business, like, my wife is like running that. For Urban EDC, I actually had an operator before, but then I've stepped in now, and I'm actually looking underneath the hood, and there's a lot of stuff that's like broken, and so I'm actually in the process of fixing that, and I actually just hired a chief of staff, and so I'm training her now to be a little more of that operator role in this business. And so it's not a perfect model, because you need to have really good people, and like, yeah, there's gonna be times when like you have to make personnel changes, and then you may have to step in and you have to make some changes. But it's an iterative process, and then like you'll eventually find the people that you need, and then like, I can kind of like take a step back again, and then like build another business, right? But it's really about all the people that you surround yourself with. Like you just have to know like, oh, this particular project or task is perfect for this person, and so I'm gonna throw it at them and see what they think. Like it's kind of like, yeah, it's like weird, but like I guess I have the ability to just like, when I have an idea, I'll be like, all right, do you want to do this? Okay, if we're doing it, let's come out with this like plan, and then let's throw it at this person who knows exactly what they're supposed to do, right? So it's kind of like this, like the way that you organize information, and then like I don't know, it's like you want to get it moving, right? So you don't want to just sit on it. You want to just like, what's the next step? Okay, here you go. Yeah.
There's so much good stuff to what you said. I think I don't know if you're like this is like on the forefront of your mind, but just me hearing about it, this ability to take action to find the next step and the next step
Yeah.
and the next step seems really important to kind of your whole journey because a lot of people get stuck with what if and fears and blockages and you just do it. You hire an operator, you decide to not do some of the things that you're doing to prioritize your son, or you're looking under a hood, you hire someone new. So it just seems like you're able to just do it, and that's wonderful. But I also want to talk about the good people concept because good people is critical. How do you find good people? And can you answer in the framing? Initially, you talked about networking, right? Like creating your network, there's good people there. And then there's good people where now they're working with you or working for you. How do you find good people?
This is like the $1 million question, right? It's um you have to find them anywhere. Like literally you have to, it's got to be one of your top priorities as a leader, as you know, as a CEO founder. Like finding good people is how you're going to scale. And it's not easy, and you have to use your network, use agencies. You know, you have to do some hunting yourself. Like you got to go out there and like look on LinkedIn profiles, whatever you need to do, and like do some like whatever you need to do to assemble that team. I mean, that's going to be, you know, you just got to do whatever it takes. And now the way that I try to set these up is like you want to have a period where you can work with them a little bit. And so I've had like times when you'd hire someone and it's not the right fit. And it's really challenging to, you know, there's a lot of like compliance and like regulation stuff, and also costs. Like if you let someone go, like, you know, you have to pay for the unemployment insurance and all that stuff. Like, so you want to kind of limit your risk there a little bit, by doing like, you know, either contract to hire. So you bring them on as a 1099 contractor, and then for like 3 months, 6 months, work with them, see if you enjoy that, and then you can bring them on. Or more recently, what I've found is that, you know, the remote, the global workforce has really, you know, it's really incredible. Like 10 years ago, this was not the case, but now, like my chief of staff that I just hired, she is incredible. But for her level of work, you know, she's essentially getting paid 90% less than someone equivalent of her caliber in the US. But the amount that we're paying her is actually like a lot for her, you know, where she lives, which is the Philippines, right? So like it's kind of like she's really grateful and thankful that she has the opportunity. And like her work ethic and her loyalty is like way higher than, you know, any US employee that I've worked with. And so it's like the tides are shifting where now I feel like honestly the remote, you know, global workforce is going to be a really kind of like critical leverage point, that a lot of business owners will utilize. um yeah, so that's kind of I think of things in leverage. So like, whether you're measuring units of time or you're measuring units monetarily, like dollars, right? So like each dollar you spend on something, like what's the ROI on that? And then also like each minute or hour that you spend doing something, can you get more productivity out of yourself or from someone else?
Yeah.
And so when I think about that, it's like a no-brainer to me that like, you know, hiring someone from the Philippines, that ROI is way higher right now than the US.
Yeah. That's something I hear a lot of CEOs been telling me, and they've been writing online about how now their workforce looks very, very different compared to 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we have Paulo, my EA, on the call right now, who's shadowing us, and he is helping me from Mexico. And it's just Paulo's. We're not even 30 days yet, and he's really helping my life already. And it's just incredible to be able to have that help. And as a business owner, it is that decision of and finding that balance of when do I need help, what kind of skill sets do I need, where can I best find it, and now also how do I make a remote kind of working style work out? How can I be very clear about expectations, about culture, about the things that we'll do together? Obviously, all of these tools help too, but there must be something that you're doing to make it very, very clear that it gets translated through space and time in Zoom and Slack.
Yeah, I think that the remote work tools, there's gonna be more improvements too. But I think definitely like COVID in 2020, like that's accelerated all the tools that's come out. Um, but I do think that I don't know, you like all the everyone that I'm working with, like they're really they're thankful that because like working remotely is such a I don't know, they love it, right? And so it's like they want to do more of it, and like I don't know, it's just like it just works if you can find the right cadence. And one thing I'll say about that is kind of like a pro tip if you're trying to manage remote employees is like have a weekly cadence, and so like have deliverables each week. So literally they can't slack off for 2 weeks because every week you have deliverables. And so like if you do it that way, then it's a good way to check like, oh, like, okay, let's see your deliverables. Okay, let's measure against that. Like, and so there's this concept like the 20-mile march, Jim Collins. And so like basically it's like every week you want to push the envelope forward. And if you do that with remote employees, it's a really good accountability technique as well.
Yes. So this I want to talk about. I think clarity is kindness when it comes to working with our colleagues. And I have a lot of CEOs come in and they say, "Oh, I hired someone," and I almost feel afraid to be so clear about the expectations and I want them to have free reign, but I always think it's so much better to stay close and clear in the beginning for the very least, if not always. So then there is more free reign and creativity when it gets to actually doing the work, right? So the expectations are aligned. I'm so in agreement with that with you. Paulo and I do a start of the day report and an end of the day report. We're very, very clear on what we're accomplishing. I share with him my to-do list and my top goals. And then obviously we have the 30, 60, 90 for
Mm-hmm.
onboarding. But beyond that, I think I like to manage in my previous teams too, very, very clearly on a weekly basis. What is everyone doing? What is our goal on a quarterly basis? We're planning.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really a leader's responsibility to be this clear. And only within the clarity, people feel comfort and safety and they know the guardrails to do their best work.
That's perfectly said. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more because you talked about the top of funnel, getting top of funnel of good people, putting them
Yeah.
in. What are the structures in place to de-risk the business owner and try to assess if this is the right fit? But what would you say are your superpowers to actually like see if this person is a good fit or not?
Okay. So I think that I did something really I don't know if it's like creative or whatever, but like for this chief of staff hiring process, um it was a kind of an unusual process, and I'll kind of walk you through that. And there's a very specific reason why I created it this way. And so um I think it kind of it weeded out a lot of people, let's put it that way. So I before I interviewed anybody, so I was getting candidates. I was working with a few different firms and I was getting candidates, and each time a candidate came in, I just sent them an assessment, and the assessment was very specific. And so it was like there were like 8 questions. The first 4 were more general, broad, like more of the soft skills questions, like where do you see yourself in 10 years, like things like that. Um, but then and then I was very specific with in the instructions. I said, please record more than 2 minutes, but not more than 3 minutes. So it had to be between 2 and 3 minutes. And
Mm.
so what I found is that most people, they 90%, 95% of candidates, they were short of the 2 minutes. And so to be honest, answering for 2 minutes is a long time for a question like that. And so I realized afterwards that 2 minutes is a long time.
Mm.
But the candidate that I ended up hiring, what I realized was that she had prepared like the answer, and so it's clear that she had rehearsed it, and so it was like
Uh,
perfectly like 2 minutes and 5 seconds. And so it's clear. So you could tell that she had already, like, the preparation to answer these questions was already there. And like, while the other candidates, they were just turning on their camera, just answering, and it was like 20 seconds long, and they would like upload it.
mm,
Right. And so like, I already
mm,
saw the difference there. And so those are the
mm,
first four questions were, whatever, like send a video, upload a video. And I use like Typeform for this, by the way. So upload a video answering these four questions, and between 2 and 3 minutes, right? And then some candidates actually had recorded an earlier video that they were using to send to other like jobs, and so that was like a huge red flag because it was like, wait, so you didn't even like, put the time in to record like an actual like individualized video, like personalized videos. You just use like a video that you used before. Like that is like that was like an
mm,
automatic like no, right?
mm,
And then the last four, so there was about 8 questions. The last four questions were very like situational.
mm,
And so I said, okay, so this specific scenario, let's say this specific scenario happened where, an example is like a customer ordered a product and they received the wrong product. Um, you know, we were investigating with our fulfillment center that X, Y, and Z. And so I gave them the scenario and I said, what would you do? And there was no right or wrong answer. I just want to see like how they reason and deduct a problem to see their problem solving skills. Right. And
mm,
so like there were four situational stuff, and some of it touched on management. And so like one of the questions is like, so this person, we work with them, but they're always late to a meeting, or like one day they don't show up. Customers are super upset, and you need to step in and answer some of these emails, but you have an important presentation coming up in the next hour that you got to prepare for. Like, what do you do?
wow.
Right. And so like it's about this, like, okay, well, I have an important presentation in an hour that I got to prepare for, but then all these upset customers are emailing me, and you're supposed to fill in for that, right? Or like, so like, what do you do? Like, and so there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to see
Yeah,
how they handle that situation. It's like high pressure situation.
yeah.
And so they all write down their answers, and so like I also get to see their written skills, which is
Yes.
like crazy. So there's a lot of differences in the written skills that I saw.
Mm,
And so like this one candidate that I went with, she had like nearly flawless written skills, whereas the other candidates, even though their video like that was like decent, it wasn't like their written was not strong. And
mm,
so like I don't know, this exercise I didn't even like think that it was gonna be that enlightening,
mm,
but it like almost eliminated
mm,
all the candidates except one. And
wow.
so I interviewed two candidates, like her and another candidate, just because I was like I can't just interview one candidate. um, but it ended up like she was just the strongest. And to be honest, she was not gonna be. I had another person in mind who I thought
Uh,
was stronger when I first got the inquiries in, right? But I was like, just you know what, it doesn't hurt. Just send every single person the assessment, and let's see how it goes. And so the assessment
wow.
really helped me like
Yeah.
see, yeah. So that I would say like, so
Mhm.
I didn't have to interview like 10 people because that's my time, right? It's like my time that's valuable, and so like
Mhm.
just send them to the assessment, and then later on you can like interview just 1 or 2 people. So
Mm. I think what I'm learning from this is that you created questions and situations where you get to see people act. It's not just them answering, it's not just a video answer, it's not just a written answer, but how did they think? How do they follow rules? What are all the things we can test while doing the same thing,
yes,
which I think is really, really smart. I think written one is a great one. The video one is a great one. I was just reading this book, I had it somewhere, called the Super Communicators, and I wish I got this tip earlier, but I just read it, and I might butcher the exact situation for it, but I believe it's either the FBI or the CIA hiring. No, it was NASA. It was NASA hiring for astronauts, and they needed
mm,
to be play well with each other, right? Because if something happens, they needed to have leadership. They need to like be mentally strong. They need to be like the best of the best. And the one thing that they found that was really important was emotional intelligence. And how do you screen for that? So this person basically spent like years and years and years trying to figure out and watch tapes of interviews, and he found out that in order to test for EQ, he will try to modulate his emotions and his kind of his energy and his volume throughout the interview and see if the interviewee is automatically following it. And if they do,
Mm.
it means that they have high EQ. So that makes me think about you, because this is another situation where you're testing something, like you're testing multiple things at the same time. You're doing one thing, but you're watching how they react. And I think I would personally want to try that in the future when I'm interviewing someone, because that just seems like so easy. And yeah, it works for NASA.
Yeah, I just thought like I didn't. My initial goal with that assessment was to just like save me some time and like because I knew that like if I got 20 candidates, I didn't want to interview 20 candidates, right?
Right.
And so my initial goal was that, but then it ended up doing a lot more. Like there's like undertones of different like things that came out that were unintended that I saw in these candidates. Like for example, like you know, I sent these assessments out like on a Thursday, right? And so I wanted to see how quickly they turn it around too. So that's like another like layer of test, quote unquote testing. And so
Yeah.
like candidates would, the next day, Friday, they would have all these. But then
Yeah.
some candidates, yeah, it was the next day, but it was like the same video upload. Like it wasn't like,
Mm,
and so it was like an interesting balance of like, okay, do you want to do it quickly?
mm,
But then like your work is not as good, or do you want to like submit it
mm,
on Monday and your work
mm,
is good?
mm,
Um, so it's like this balancing act, and what I actually found out too was that weekend was like a holiday weekend in the Philippines,
mm,
and so that also was enlightening because I didn't get a lot of responses. I got like responses starting like Tuesday, Wednesday.
mm,
But then the one that I ended up hiring, she actually sent it over like on Monday. And what's
mm.
also funny is like the videos that she recorded, like she was in like a hotel. And so I was like,
Ah,
this is like really weird. Like I was like, is she like traveling or something? And like it ended up that like she was like at a leadership conference over the weekend. So she was at a
ah.
leadership conference learning on a holiday weekend.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is no brainer.
Well, she sounds awesome. I hope
Yeah.
I get to meet her
Yeah.
someday. I'm so excited for you to have found someone, that feeling of being able to find the right person and to get help on the business. That just, it's like one plus one equals greater than two type of thing
Totally.
when the magic happens, right? I kind of want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about your creating. I know the
Yeah.
newsletter and the creating is generally on pause right now, but it seemed like you had a lot of success in a relatively short amount of time, tens of thousands of followers on
Yeah.
X or Twitter.com. How did you get started? Because I have a lot of CEOs who want to build an online brand, myself included, and it's not as easy to
Right.
get your feet wet.
So when I first started, I had like I actually had like I don't know 400 followers on X, and most of them were like high school friends that like weren't even on the platform anymore. So basically, I had like nearly zero followers, right? Um, I think so. The biggest lesson I learned is like it's going to be really frustrating in the beginning because perceived authority is very different from actual authority. And so even though like, here I am, I have all this business experience, but then a creator that has an audience that's never built a business. So there are creators out there right now who are telling everyone how to create a business and they've never created a business before. And like when I see that, it really upset me because I'm like, this person's never done anything, but they have like a ton of followers, and all their followers are like just like worshiping them like they're like some kind of god or something. Like, oh my god, like you're so right, like you're a genius. And then like here I am, like I'm like writing stuff that I think is like pretty valuable, but like no one is responding. Like you're just shouting into the void or whatever, right? And so like that's gonna happen in the beginning. It's the most frustrating thing. And so perceived authority is very different from actual authority. And so you kind of have to like build that from scratch. It's like a really weird thing. And it's very frustrating, but you just have to. I mean, it's like the same. It's consistency and like all that stuff. Like everyone knows, but you just get better at it over time. And then you start networking, and so what ends up happening is like as you grow, some people will notice you, and then they'll reach out to you, be like, hey, you have some good stuff, and so you kind of build that way, and then like that grows and grows, and like you might have one post that goes viral, like the one that Matt saw, and so like Matt is he's I would consider him like a pretty big player in the game. He knows a lot of people, and so like if you get in touch with someone like Matt, I mean, he connects people. Like I met you through Matt, and I mean, it's just like you just never know when that point's gonna happen. It's just like you just gotta keep swinging, keep swinging the bats, keep taking the at bats, and like one of these you'll hit, and it'll just like, it'll be it it won't be like life changing, but it'll definitely like put you on the radar, and then like your level will get higher, and so now you have like this higher baseline of people where they're gonna be like, oh, okay, well this guy is like now on this level, and so you start networking with these people, and then another post will go to, and like now you're leveled up to another level, um and so it's kind of like that. But to be honest, like it's a really tiring game, and so what's interesting is like I've taken about a 6-month break now, and I've realized how psychologically, I don't know, like I was on the hamster wheel with content. And so it's like the dopamine hits of like, oh, this person followed me. Wow, like this person who has like, millions of followers followed me. Like it's like these types of hits that are like, I didn't realize how much I was like craving that when I was in that stage. But now that I'm like taking a step back from that, like I don't think it was healthy, right? And so I'm like reassessing how I want to come back as a content creator, because I don't know if I want to get back on that hamster wheel like the same way that I was on. And so yeah, it's like I'm still like figuring it out, but I think what I'm gonna do when I come back is just write and share stuff with no expectations in return. I think that's where people get really tripped up, is like you post something and you think it's amazing content, and then it's a dud or it doesn't do anything, and then you get disappointed. And so you just, I think for me, I'm just gonna like, I'm not gonna do any like the commenting, because like there's a lot of these like groups where you engage with each other and all that stuff. Those can get really tiring too, because you're like doing it for hours, right? And so I would say like I don't want to do any of that anymore. I just want to like just share, and like if people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't, and that's okay. Like I'm just sharing how I feel. And so I think that's kind of like where I'm going with this now, with this new strategy, because I feel like life's too short to stress over what other people think about your content, right? So
It's a lot. I have one of my teachers used to say, like, I asked him, hey, like, I'm posting this podcast, and my podcast is very, very small right now. It's just in the beginning phases, but you can feel when people are commenting and people send you a
yes,
message. It's exciting, right? I'm like, okay, I'm feeling like more agitated than usual. And he tells me, well, Sabrina, like, your nervous system is just getting extra pings when your
yes,
stuff is out there. You can feel kind of when people have eyeballs on you in a way, like, and you're just like exposing yourself to a lot of these things. What you need to do is just separate that out as much as possible. And what you're talking about is one way, like the mindset way of, hey, I'm just going to have no expectations. I also think that that's probably one of the things that's like prevented me from giving it an honest try until like about now, because I wasn't sure what my mindset is going to be going into it.
hmm
And I think this is the same as entrepreneurship too. I think a lot of CEOs end up starting a company and they come back and they think, oh, wait a minute, I had no idea. Like I knew about my strengths and my skill sets and I can do this, but I didn't know how much it was going to take mentally. So I think that aspect of doing anything is so important, is to pick an attitude that aligns with your life philosophy, right? And your philosophy is
Right.
life's too short. Like why why do this?
Yeah.
Um and yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you're wanting to choose a different way that works better for you, because some people will find it helpful for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when you first get started, everything's really exciting. Like, oh, I'm getting, so many followers, all these people. Like it's a lot of fun, to be honest. Like, it's a lot of fun. Um, but it's hard to get off of that. It's like a dopamine hit, right? So it's like a drug, and so if you don't get the drug, every day or whatever, like you feel down, and so you're like, oh, I didn't get that many, likes or whatever, and so it's a dumb game that you're playing, and so I'm just trying to like, it's really difficult, like but just kind of like separate out content from validation, like how people would think of it, right? And so it's really hard because like validation is like kind of like is the scorecard for content creation. How many people share it? How many people like it? How many people comment on it? That's like the scorecard.
I think similarity in business too. So many of us, and it's so hard to get out of it. Revenue equals validation. A sale equals validation. A deal equals validation. And on some level, it is of the business, but it's not fundamentally a validation of you and me as human
Right.
beings, of our worth and who we are and our value. And that can get so tangled up, and that could create the highest ecstasy
Right.
or the lowest of
Lowest.
lows. It's just a roller coaster drive.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right. I mean, that's why I think for business, one of the best things to do is to just stay even keeled. Like,
Yeah.
something amazing happens, just know that tomorrow something bad could happen.
Yeah.
Same thing. You have like a really terrible day. Like, well, guess what? Tomorrow you have another day, and like
Yeah.
something amazing can happen. So it's like, I don't know. It's just like you have to have this like very like almost like a stoic perspective on
Yes.
things. Yeah.
Yes. Stoic, and I almost think like expanded, because your life is so much bigger than the business. It's There's always going to be ups and downs. And for me personally, I find it so helpful to focus on like how am I, like, just focus on how I'm feeling day to day. How well can I take care of myself? And for me, focus on the craft of coaching, because that I can always get better at the craft of coaching if that is my bread and butter right now, or it's my craft of writing. And that's, I think, what you're alluding to with your writing too. If you just write, if it's fun for you, it's helpful for you, and that is like a good outlet for you, then great. That's good enough.
Yeah. What's so funny is at one point I was literally thinking, like, when I'm going about my day, I was like, oh, that would be an amazing hook for this post. And it's like so messed up in a way because like even before something happened, I'll be like, if this happened, that would be the best hook ever. And so I'm like trying to get that result to
Oh.
happen so I can have
Mm,
this hook. And I was like,
mm,
wow, that's really messed up because like now I'm like living like I want something to happen just so that I can have a good hook for a post. Like, I don't know, it just seemed like kind of messed up.
mm,
And so it's like, okay, I
mm.
gotta like wire my brain because like that is not how I should think about going about my day,
Yeah, yeah.
So
And I think these mindset adjustments are critical. And those aside, what do you recommend to CEOs? Because a lot of CEOs think that building a brand is really great for raising funding, for
yeah.
recruiting, for what, I mean, so many great purposes. What is like the system that you would recommend someone take to like maybe build the audience with a little bit more
Yeah.
consciousness and not as much stress to their mental health?
I mean, I would definitely say like if you can just write every day. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. But just get your thoughts out on paper, and just start posting. Like basically, it's in the beginning, it's going to be quantity, so you want to do it a lot, and the purpose of that is not to produce like amazing quality work. The purpose of that is to get in the habit of doing it. And so that's like step one. And then I would say step two is like start looking at like patterns in your writing, like what does well, what doesn't do well, and you can definitely like, there's a lot of content out there on like how to improve your posts, like the hook, the body, and then like at the end there's got to be a little bit of an element of surprise. And so there is definitely like some kind of template that you can use. Not template, but like it's like human psychology, but like typically you want to have some you want to open up some curiosity in the beginning. Like if you analyze a good post, even in Instagram or X, like it's always like a really good hook. Like, oh, I'm intrigued, I want to read more. It's like the first couple lines, and then the body of it is like storytelling. So you develop a story, and then the ones that go viral, like at the end, there's like a small twist, that unexpected twist, and that's the thing that makes people want to share. And so like that format is kind of like what I it's not always perfect, um but that's kind of the structure that I use for a post. And so yeah, so keep writing, do a lot of writing, you'll get better at it. And then step 3, I would say, so step 2 is like get feedback, analyze your writing, and then step 3 is like get a little more like purposeful with your writing. So like you can definitely like do a little more crafting, I just said here, like really like use the language, use the words, like for the hook, like correctly, and like just like structure it properly. And like, so it's like quantity first, and then it's like assessment, and then it's like quality, and then it's quantity and quality, because you want to do a lot of the really good stuff, right? So those are kind of like the general steps, I would say. It's not easy. And I would also add that there's a reason why a lot of founders and CEOs don't become creators, is because they're busy. Like I'm like, it's just totally, it's so ironic that most content creators are actually not, they're not actually in the weeds of doing stuff. And so they're just mostly talking. Oh, and you know what? I'll add one more thing. If you look at a lot of big content creators who are like business people, and then it's funny because like if you look at their comments, a lot of some of the stuff that I saw was like, hey, I tried your service, but like it was not very good, just candid feedback. So it's like they're saying stuff that's like ideological and philosophically that's the way it should be, but they're not executing on it because they're too busy making content. They're not, because content is distribution. And so the bigger they grow on Twitter or X, the more clients they're going to get. And so it's like this thing of like, but they're not actually looking at, they're not managing their business. And so like it's almost like if you're all in on content creation, you need a really strong operator who's not going to be content creation. They're going to be just behind the scenes doing everything. um if you want to do both, like that is really challenging, is what I'll say. um
Yeah. That's a
yeah.
really good point. It's like a whole nother business of its own. First, I want to appreciate like not easy but simple step that you laid out.
Yeah.
You used so much first principles thinking in the
Thanks.
in this whole conversation. It's just like think about it, right? Even in the interview process, you just thought about what would make sense, put it out there, and then learn from it. And same with content creation. And you're exactly right. I mean, some online brands can be so deceptive. Pedigrees can be so deceptive. Whether a thing, a service, a product, a human is of integrity or not, you really don't know until you've really tried it. And I always think a lot about how online space, it feels like it's really small and really big at the same time. Like you see these prominent people, at least in tech Twitter or business Twitter, like these are just some of the creators, right? But there are a lot of very successful business owners out there who may have no marketing or may have very simple marketing, and they may be experts in some other things. And it's really about picking what works for you. And that goes back to what you're saying is why you wanted to do certain things. How much does it make sense to your life? And does it even feel good? Is it adding to your life or is it hurting your mental health? Because everyone's journey is going to be different, and we all have to pick what works best for us.
Yeah, I think it really just comes down to like your own values, like what are
Yeah.
they, and then just stay true to those values and don't
Yeah.
let the outside world penetrate that, because they
Yeah.
will they will try to penetrate that,
Yeah.
because yeah,
Yeah.
internet, right? The internet is crazy people, there's keyboard
Yeah.
warriors, and like,
Oh my goodness.
so it's just, yeah.
And in real life too, a lot of CEOs tell me, and I've personally experienced this as well. It seems like the more people you know, the more advice you get, and people are trying to almost like they have a lot of well-intended information on what you should do and what you should implement. And some of it it's helpful, but the most important thing is to sift that information through your lens, like what you said, of your values and what works for your company and your life, and not listen to everything because it's just so much information out there. There's enough information
Yeah.
out there.
And one other thing is like most people, they are just know that like they're gonna be spicy, like spicier on a public persona than real life, and that's done on purpose. So if you actually if you reckon so if you like watch like TV shows, like you'll realize like, for example, like this is just a random example, but like on like ESPN, right? Like the anchors are like yelling when they talk, and that's done on purpose because of the energy and like they're just trying to be controversial. And so like you'll get people like that who are trying to be controversial, and so like you don't have to necessarily like buy into that, right? So uh, just do what you want and how you feel, but just know that the internet is not reality, right? So
Yeah, it's true words.
yeah,
Or there are people like you and me who are trying to make this interview as real to our actual
yeah, exactly.
conversation as much as possible because that's what, like, otherwise I just can't do it. It would make it inauthentic for me. So there's so many ways to choose. And yeah, yeah. I mean, I have learned so much from this. This was super fun. Is there anything that I haven't asked you yet that you wanted to talk about?
Um, I feel like we've covered a lot. But I mean, if there's anything specific that you want to talk about, like structure of a personal co or like more tactical strategies, we can definitely dive into that. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, like I'm happy to also like come on for another, whatever if you want. Like that's,
Yeah.
so
I feel like at some point there might be a whiteboard like presentation style of the structures, but I think today was such a great overview of how you think and how you make decisions, how you make certain things better in your businesses. Um, I guess I do have one thing like to kind of point out to that you said in the earlier part, which is like you came to SF with no network and you had to build it yourself. I just have a deep sense of appreciation for what that means because me too, when I moved here in the US, I didn't really know anyone here and we didn't have families here who know people, right? And there it takes a special type of resilience and a special type of drive to learn a different language, a different culture, and build a business here. And I just have so much appreciation for anybody who's trying to do that in a different country because it's not easy. But if you do know how to do it, it becomes a superpower. You're scrappy as hell.
yeah, you become resilient really
Exactly.
fast. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And it comes with a certain type of confidence, right? And you just know that if you've started from there, started from knowing no one, and now you have employees, you have people who are supporting you, you have people online who know you, and you just like expanded your world like that. I think it's really, really incredible and it's inspirational.
thank you so much, Sabrina. That means a lot. Appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. What are some interesting people you might want to connect with? How can people find you if
Yeah.
people are wondering about certain topics? Like, what are the things that you would like to hear from people about?
So yeah, my newsletter and podcast is called First Class Founders. And so the podcast is still up and there's like over 100 episodes. So if people want to listen to that, they can. Right now it's kind of on pause, but like I said, I'm going to get back into it. Maybe with a different approach. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if people want to, there's like there's a form there and people can reach out to me if they want to chat. Or if they sign up for the newsletter, there's actually, you can just hit reply and like I get all the replies. So, so yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking your time.
Of
And
course.
I really, really like this conversation. I think people are going to learn a lot. And yeah, so, so grateful.
Awesome. Thanks, Sabrina. I appreciate it.